It is night. It is for Halloween. But there is a tap at the window. No one there. Again at the other window. But no one is there either. Surprise, surprise. It is Father with pumpkins, Indian corn, and straw. Everything we need for Halloween decorations. Julie wants to know what the straw is for. To cover the roses with and keep them warm during the winter. The whole family is getting ready to make the jack-o'-lantern. Peter is finished with
Broadcasting under the night sky from the edge of an undisclosed jungle on the Gulf of Mexico, I'm Christopher Garetano, your voice in the night. For the next hour, allow me to be your guide into the bizarre unknown, the fantastic macabre, and together we'll journey to that borderland between fiction and reality, a place beyond all rational explanation. We are now off to the witch. Halloween night is a deep sensory experience of autumn's October colors and ever-evolving traditions. Ghost story folklore, mystery, and Devil's Night mischief. A mirror of our mortality and a grand festival to celebrate the end of summer. What we all seem to inherently know without indisputable scientific proof is that there's something after and beyond our mortal existence. First experienced in our formative years, Halloween is a metaphysical spook show that sparked the minds of so many of our horror, fantasy, and science fiction Imagineers. And if you weren't artistically motivated by the many glorious tentacles of our ghoulish celebration, you were certainly influenced by the artists and creators that were inspired by it. Everyone from the cold, dead voices of Edgar Allan Poe to slime-creeping, metamorphosized, lurking death of H.P. Lovecraft, the fifth dimension of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone to the whispering, haunted structures of Shirley Jackson. The Creole blood-sucking freaks of Anne Rice to the endlessly expanding dance macabre of the mighty Stephen King. What's consistent with all of the great horror and gothic engineers of art, music, literature, and cinema history is that they were all connoisseurs of the unknown, and they drew their amorphous inspirational energy from the deepest wells, the pure sources, from strange noises and shadows in the night, ancient mythology and folklore, arcane magic, archaic cinema, and circus sideshows, to the mysterious sounds of primal nature. These are the deepest and purest wells of inspiration. As nightmare and dreamscape weavers, we share our influence and inspire each other, essentially changing culture and adding depth to the imagination of our audience. Walt Disney himself realized that to have joy, you also need sorrow, and he wasn't kidding. And so was the formula for the most celebrated villains of his vintage, including my favorite, the Headless Horseman, who appeared in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Disney's 1949 version of Washington Irving's classic Halloween ghost story of a vengeful specter who's also one of the first examples of what would become the horror movie slasher. The Horseman was a Hessian trooper who lost his head during the Revolutionary War from a powerful, grisly impact of a cannonball. As Irving originally wrote it, the brutal warrior soon became a dark rider, hell-bent on removing the heads of unsuspecting travelers who crossed his path on Halloween night. For me, Washington Irving's book was one of the very first ghost stories that I was exposed to. Tonight we're diving into the energies and the artistic influence of the deep wells of Halloween night. Later, we'll be talking with Kacie Marie, a unique artist who was born of pure imagination during the month of October. So gather round, grab a pumpkin ale or an apple cider, your favorite Halloween candy. Stay warm as the cold, ghostly breeze howls through your window pane. And join us for a celebration of the most wonderful time of the year. I'll return after this commercial break.
after these messages. We'll be right back.
Something new is waiting for you at Disneyland. It looks rather innocent, just a big, old mansion. But there's a twist. You see, this mansion is haunted. Greetings, curious mortals. I am your ghost host at the Disneyland Haunted Mansion. Why not make final arrangements to join us soon?
Halloween. Newsweek magazine calls it a superb exercise in the art of suspense, the most frightening flick in years. Halloween. The Chicago Sun-Times says it's so scary, I would compare it to Psycho. It's the kind of picture, says the Chicago Tribune, that forces you to sleep with the lights on. A masterpiece, says New York's New Times. Halloween, from Compass International, rated R.
I want to bite your finger. It's a Dracula game. Just set the clock. Just try your luck.
If Dracula's cape opens, you have to put your finger in his mouth and press the lever. If he leaves a mark on your finger, you have to start over again.
You didn't bite me!
If you can sneak all the way around Dracula's house, you'll win the game.
You're not supposed to bite people.
It's a Dracula game.
I want to bite your finger from Hasbro.
In 1968, George Romero reflected back at the world with his horror classic, Night of the Living Dead. Throughout 4 decades, from the rising dawn and on throughout land, he continued to inspire our nightmares. Now, 3 years after his death, George A. Romero returns from the grave with his final masterpiece, The Living Dead, a mammoth novel and his ultimate zombie epic. From Tor Books and co-authored by Daniel Kraus comes George A. Romero's The Living Dead. Find it wherever books are sold.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garetano, and tonight's guest is a pure artist. I first experienced Kacie Marie's work through her music, an audible sensation of pop sensuality, mystery, and ethereal dreamscape originality. I soon discovered she was a visual artist as well, an experimental filmmaker, and I find many of the influences of Halloween and horror movies all over her work, a kaleidoscope of colors and fashion mixed playfully with the gorgeous macabre. But most importantly, her originality is evident of diving deep into the pure wells, as she'll explain tonight. So, with one of her songs, ironically titled Holy, leading us into a fantastic conversation, here's my interview with Kacie Marie.
I'm rich with lust and it's still, and it's dripping down my fingers. I told you I was a saint, still I try to pull the trigger. I find it hard to believe that you've ever been a sinner. I told you I'd be the flame, no, I've never been a quitter. So take the time and close your eyes. I'll make you feel holy, holy. Just take the time and close your eyes. I'll make you feel holy, holy, holy.
But I'm from Pennsylvania. It's like a farm town woods place called Worcester. And yeah, I was lucky enough to grow up right across the street from the woods, which there was a creek, and then it was just farms. So lots of frogs, lots of creatures, and definitely I feel like some of my earliest memories were more just about like a tone, a feeling of things. So like the sounds of cicadas, like, I didn't even know what that sound was for a very long time. Once I realized it was a scary looking bug, that was fun to finally realize. But I just knew it as like the sound of summer. And we also got a lot of bats. And it was in the time where kids were sort of still allowed to run free to an extent because of being surrounded by farms and stuff. It wasn't like in a city or anything. So thankfully we were allowed to kind of like be barefoot, and nothing was harmed. But I do remember going out in the summers and my brother taking a shotgun, and you know what, maybe I shouldn't say that. But he used to go out with a shotgun and shoot at the bats that flew above, which I don't think he ever actually was intending to shoot anything, and he never hit anything. But I think it was just the excitement of like the sound of the ringing shotgun, and the bats flying all above, and just the little like frogs coming up. Just, yeah, like I feel like a lot of my memories were like the smells and the sounds and just basically the senses. I don't have like a grasp on like more specific memories other than just like what it felt like to be young.
And that's interesting because that can have an extreme influence on an artist, just those things you mentioned right there. Whereas I think some people are lacking in imagination that weren't out there in the night with these kind of unique experiences where your older brother is shooting at bats with a shotgun. That is a giant stone thrown in that pond of imagination. And so now I'm understanding. So you can keep telling me more. Let's go back.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, just thinking about, it's funny because when I'm thinking of these memories, my mind is working its way around the house that I grew up in. And it's funny because I still dream when I have dreams. I'm in that house, which is so strange to me because I don't think about it in any other way. But I tend to dream in those rooms, which I think is kind of neat that I do have memories tucked away in there.
Did you ever have anything happen in that when you were a little kid in that house that may have been questionable in terms of something not of this world, or did you ever experience any kind of haunting, or were you fascinated by those things as a kid?
Well, it's funny you say that. I definitely had you know what? I had a grasp on sort of haunted kind of stuff where it's like I never allowed the energy into me. But however, the entire time that I grew up there, my mind played tricks on me literally the entire time I lived there. Like I would imagine someone standing behind me in the mirror, but I always knew it was me. It was kind of like I didn't have control over my mind, and my mind loved to play tricks on me, and it was constant. And then when I finally moved out of there, I moved into a place in Philly by myself. And that's when I was like, enough is enough. And I didn't allow myself to haunt myself anymore because I didn't want, I didn't want to have the shit scared out of me.
Okay, so October 21st is your birthday. What was Halloween in October like when you were a kid?
I think just October in general was really exciting for me, whether it was my birthday or not. Maybe that's just kind of sculpted from when I was younger, but like I just love the season of fall and leading up to Halloween. I think actual Halloween, the day 31st is kind of like the come down for me. It's the whole leading up to it. So around my birthday, it was nice being when I was younger because we do birthday parties and almost always do it at a haunted house. So I kind of got to bring a gang of classmates to, we always go to the same one. It was called The Barn in Pennsylvania, and it was awesome. It's one of the best haunted houses I've been to yet. And it was just one house, but I still remember all the kind of intricacies of the haunted house. So I go back to it as my favorite.
Can you tell me a little bit about that in detail? What it was like for a little girl to walk through something like that, and you're anticipating your birthday, and you have all of these wonderful festivities happening, on the edge of the macabre.
Absolutely. I remember waiting in line and it being like sort of damp outside and dark, and there's always like somebody menacing with some kind of meat cleaver of sorts walking up and down the line. And I think we spoke about it before, but I have a funny response to fear, and that's just giggling, and that I'm still the same way. So just feeling giggly and excited to go in. And some of the details I remember from the barn was, remember this one room, it had like a glass floor and it was just rats and bugs running underneath of it. That was one vivid thing I remember where I always was curious, like how they created that. um, Another one, I remember walking down this like slim black light dark hallway, and the walls would protrude with hands and faces that would come close to touching you, and that was just so again, I was just like, how are they doing this? There's just so many like really creative things, and thinking back that that was, you know, however many years ago, it doesn't, like, still today it still holds up in my mind like that. It didn't feel fake, it felt real.
It's those live illusions too that inspired so many of us and continue to, especially if it's done right. Do you feel that? Well, number one, why do you think it is that we love to be scared? There's this element of safety, of course, when it's fabricated, but why do you think that is?
It's a good question. I think it's just there's some spontaneity in being scared of not knowing what's going to happen and not knowing who's going to pop out. And I think that even though, you know, we could look at life as scary, but generally we have our day to day. It's kind of a normal routine. And when we're scared, there's a heightened sense of what's going to happen. And I think that there's some like thrill in that, and not in the not knowing.
And these live illusions are so amazing, especially when they get really creative, like what you were just describing with the bugs and the rats underneath the glass. I'm assuming that that had an effect on your visuals. Those early years, those formative years, are deeply rooted in you. And do you feel that live illusions like those you experienced in that haunted house during the time of your birthday and Halloween had an influence on your current work?
I've never really thought about it before, but as you asked that question, I kind of got goosebumps because I'm realizing right now that it definitely has. Because when I'm creating visuals for music or audio visual, I'm always thinking of the layers beyond. So, like the idea that there's a layer below us that's running underneath and manifesting other creepy crawlers, and the idea of the wall sort of pushing through. Whenever I think about visuals, I always want to go through. It's like I want to see it, I want to feel it, and then I want to cross through and see what's on the other side. So maybe it actually has affected me more than I realized till right now.
Did you have nightmares as a kid?
I had more daymares, if that's a appropriate word to use. I had visuals on the regular, and I was well aware that it was my own brain haunting myself, but that happened for many years. Definitely the woman from, or the girl from The Exorcist was somebody that haunted me constantly. Like anytime I went to walk up the stairs, I always, at my, you know, my childhood house, I always imagined like a person that would like crawl just into view and like look over at me at the top of the stairs. Every time I brush my teeth or close my eyes, washing my face, I always imagine a visual standing behind me, just kind of haunting me at every corner. And it was scary. And I was aware that my brain was doing it, but I couldn't stop it. So it was this really interesting kind of fuckery that I didn't really have control of. And,
It's
oh,
that's
sorry.
so
Go
amazing.
ahead.
No, I just it blows me away. I've really thought about this in recent years, how one artist can transmute, you know, the work changes the viewer. It sometimes stays within them. So it's almost like it's somewhat parasitic, you know, especially in the case of William Friedkin making this movie. He did that to people around the world. They were terrified. And so his imagination through this, you know, ethereal plane embedded itself into your own and then grew much like a virus, you know, like it.
That's such a good point of view, that the like as it being parasitic, because that's kind of how it felt. It's like I knew it was coming through me, but I couldn't control it. I just remembered another visual. Almost every time I went to bed, and I was laying to sleep, I always imagined there was somebody behind me smiling, and it was jet. And oftentimes it was the Exorcist girl. She was just something like I grasped onto because it was such a striking visual to watch when I was young. And I think I'm pretty sure my mom was very upset to find out that I watched it so young. But yeah, it really, that plus like it, exactly, parasitic. It kind of grew from there. That was like the jump off point.
So it's okay. So you see The Exorcist as a young girl, probably relating to the vulnerability of the young girl Reagan in the story, and then this horrible thing happens to her, and it terrifies you and lingers with you. Now, here's the interesting thing about this parasite. Eventually, it can become beneficial, especially in the case of an artist who delves into the unknown or the dark side of things. Now you can draw upon how deeply that affected you, especially with the darker side of your work, which I've seen. It's beautiful at the same time, but I'm sure that movie somehow affected you because visually it's gorgeous too at times and terrifying.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've always been kind of like drawn to scary movies, and even as a kid, I always watched. My favorite thing to watch was Are You Afraid of the Dark, and some of that stuff was really scary, and like that was my show. I don't know why I turned out to be such a creepy kid, but like that's what I loved, and being inspired by like the cornfields around me. I kind of grew up in a very sort of Pennsylvania scenic town for horror. So like it was cool to grow up there because then, around Octobers and stuff, the town kind of blew up with all of its harvesting stuff. And like I remember at this one place I used to paint faces at, it was an ice cream shop, and they had a big corn maze, and it was legit. And someone had to stand up in a tower just to help people if they freaked out and cried. And and there was an evening one too. You could come with a flashlight. And I feel like I'm kind of always searching for that same experience, and I'm getting to the point and to the age where I'm like, I think I need to make my own because I want more. I know it exists out there, but I'm always just looking for that kind of fun, creepy, scary experience.
I know how you feel. See, it's now you're going to have that catharsis through your own work, creating that, and also you're going to. I hate to call it this, that you're going to create that parasite, but it's a glorious one because it evolves, and it could spark the brain for another Imagineer in the future, and that's what that's what I'm getting at. It's that these powerful pieces of work somehow had an effect on us. And some of us just go on admiring the work, and that's most of us probably. But then some of us uh, continue to create and truly allow that to affect us in the right way, as opposed to scraping surface level images and copying them. We allow that to become amorphous, and it inspires us to create through our own filter.
I love that. Love that a lot. And for the record, I wasn't able to kick the parasite until I was about to move out of my house and move in to live alone the first time I moved out of my place. And I kind of had a hard sit down with my brain, and I was like, that's enough because I'm going to be living alone, and I don't want to be living in fear. And that was that. And it never really happened again. There's like little moments of it, like even still now living alone, it'll like sort of like fuck with me a little bit. Even just the classic, like I don't like to stand by the bed for too long that's everybody's thing of getting grabbed by the ankle. But I still am like, I've got like little quick dough feet into bed. But it's fun though. It's like scary, but it's still fun and funny. And we can think about it as like a younger thing we used to do. So I'm kind of like, okay, I know it's not real, but I'm not going to linger.
Sure, it happens sometimes. I wonder what that is. And again, not giving it any power is a good way to get rid of it. But at the same time, at where I am in life now, I'm starting to think that we exist in multi dimensions, that perhaps those things we experience are real in some way. You're feeling that energy. So where is that coming from? Did you,
Yeah.
and not to try and trigger it back in you so you have a horrible
No,
day,
there's
but I'm
there's no
curious.
trigger. There's no trigger
Okay.
for me. I'm indulgent in all of my own personal thoughts and fears and fantasies, and there's nothing really that would scare me. But I love that you said that because I feel the same way, like the same reason that we get, goosebumps at different times, and that sort of like if you indulge in a thought and you can imagine the whole backstory. I love that kind of idea, and I believe that that's possible and real. So, do you think that it's multiple dimensions or parallels at the same time, or you think it's sort of transcendent of time?
Well, these days, I used to just think, your imagination is really heavy, but what is imagination?
Hmm.
And so through that exploration, I wonder if we're channeling, these infinite dimensions and possibilities of existence, that our imagination, at least partially, is is just a channeling of information coming from elsewhere. Your dreams, your you could be sitting in a room and you have this instantaneous sensation that something's not right or something's there with you. Well, perhaps there is.
Hmm. Yeah, that's that kind of thing that sort of, the ghosts is a whole nother conversation. But I that's actually one of the doors I kind of keep shut for myself when it comes to that visual. And I know I was just saying I'm indulgent about everything, but when it comes to ghosts, I keep that closed because I do think that it can be opened. And my thing is like, I don't want company that I'm not ready for. So I have I have a lot of friends, and they see ghosts, they see visuals, and I'm like, I'm gonna keep those doors shut and just let it come from within, because I'm afraid if I open it, I won't be able to close it.
That's so interesting to me, and I respect that. I think if we were going to entertain this idea, and I have so much lately, especially with this new episode I'm making for Strange World, on a metaphysical perspective, from a metaphysical perspective, that you might be very sensitive to these energies, and that's why you have to work a little extra harder to shut it down. Whereas I think some people can just simply, they just ignore it or have never even experienced it. I myself have had some experiences in the past, and I think it's a balancing act. You're certainly not crazy. Crazy is something else. This is a sensitivity to uh, energies and perhaps other dimensions that are very real. However, we haven't fully been able to explain them or prove them with tangible science, even though quantum science is starting to prove that there are other planes of existence for sure. And I think we've just begun to consider it. Maybe in 200 years from now, there'll be a better explanation. But do you believe there's something much more than this physical life that we have, this mortal body?
Oh, most definitely. I feel like it would be impossible and slightly closed-minded to think that this is, because there's so many unanswered questions, and there's so much magic and energy, and just the fact that, like, you know even the planets alignment, and the the sounds they give off in between them, and it just everything is vibrating, and it just would be impossible for me to think that it can just here, live this life and die. And I mean, and I'm fine with that fate, and that is going to be my physical fate. But I do believe that there's so much more in between happening vibrationally, energetically, parallel worlds. Of course, I believe in aliens. Like, of course, it's just mind blowing, the possibilities, and it's so exciting. And my only frustration is I just wish I could, like, I want to go swimming in it. I want to go deeper and find out, and know more. And maybe I will someday.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
You're listening to Off to the Witch from White Phosphorus Pictures, currently available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. It's also available on the official White Phosphorus Pictures YouTube channel at Garetano 7. Subscribe today, as our forthcoming YouTube show, White Phosphorus Presents, will premiere in early 2021, along with special screenings, short films, trailers, and behind the scenes of our new movie and TV projects. Go to YouTube now and subscribe to our channel at Garetano7, that's Garetano 7, and visit our website at offtothewitch.com.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world, a world of darkness. Nobody expected it. Nobody believed it. And nothing could stop it. The one hope. The only hope. The Exorcist. Warner Brothers presents William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin. The Exorcist, rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
Don't be scared. I'm the super sweet monster with the super sweet new cereal, Count Chocula.
Biffle, here's the super sweet new cereal, Frankenberry.
But I've got chocolate sweeties for monstrous chocolate flavor.
Well, I've got berry-flavored sweeties for monstrous strawberry flavor.
Count Chocula.
Frankenberry.
Hi.
Frankenberry.
Count Chocula.
Now, for the first time, the masters of horror, Stephen King, author of Carrie, Cujo, and The Shining, and George A. Romero, creator of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, have teamed up to make a movie that will give you the creeps. Creep Show. The most fun you'll ever have being scared. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
To have me, I promise I'd take you right there. Bad luck. I told you I'd only be honest. My heart has got to be fair. Ooh, you open up your eyes for the last
So there's a new project you're working on I am so excited about, and I'm a fan of horror hosts over the years, everybody from Vampira to Elvira to Joe Bob Briggs, and it's an incredible thing that came out of a lot of independent minds that people just celebrate horror movies late night. A lot of the time it was on local stations and public access, but now we have the internet, and it seems to be a thing again, especially with Elvira releasing her autobiography and Joe Bob Briggs' show being amazing on Shudder. And I'm really interested in seeing what your interpretation of a horror host is. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Sure. I mean, right now it's in the daydream compartment, but I like this idea of doing a sort of horror hostess stuff, but angling it to my own abilities and my own shyness of sorts, because I've never believed that I was the best host when it came to sort of microphone hosting, but I like the idea of breaking down the different parts, like just eyes, just mouth, layered over some moving slow mo river or water, and having that as an excuse to do something abstract and share my work, share other people's work, and just see and kind of make it different every time. Basically, just using it as an excuse to get creative and abstract and not be so focused on, do I look perfect here? Why am I making that, why am I making that face? Just it's like I have the ambitions and the curiosity, but I don't want to be held up by the American vanity of things, or, just personal vanity. I want to just be indulgent with how creative I can get, and how creative I want to be.
Sure, it only makes sense to do it the way you're about to, and that's what's so exciting about it. It wouldn't, to me, I mean, it's fun and all if someone's imitating Cassandra Peterson or Vampira, Elvira and Vampira, but at the same time, why would we need another one
I know
when
they're amazing, they're inspiring, and they exist. And anyone who wants to sort of try and duplicate that or pay homage to that, I think that that's awesome. That's just not what I particularly want to do. I want to see if I can inspire by that and see what comes out of it. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not, but I'm okay with that outcome, because I mean, even in failing, we learn so much about ourselves. And I mean, there's no failing if you're doing something that is fun for yourself and creative for yourself and just a learning experience. So, like with this, I think it'll be a fun chance to be even indulgent with, like, I was describing about, like, kind of my natural shyness that I've always had. It's also the idea of, when I talk about just the eyes and the mouth laid over stuff, it's kind of like our worlds in the way that we're inside of our phones, inside of our computers, and that's kind of our natural addiction at this point for most people. I know for me it's a natural addiction. So it's the idea of even just like living inside there, and accepting the fate of like technology, and just seeing what I can make from inside.
if you were to imagine a new renaissance of art and music and even perspective, if you were to create that world, you have a blank canvas and you're like the god of that canvas, what would that world look like?
I think that I would see something that's just very all encompassing. I imagine laying in a big room, everyone laying on their backs, imagery on the walls everywhere, potentially different sort of weather-ish, like air blowing, streaming across, beyond theater, just an experience. And I know that they're doing a bit of that now, especially, I've seen beautiful places in Japan where you can walk in and there's just everywhere. And I know they do something in New York, but I like the idea of just, I don't know why I can't not imagine laying down, but even like laying down, I see the ripples of sort of like energy coming out from the body. So kind of like everything you do is responding to you. So I guess in art, that's in responding to your energy and your feelings.
All this stuff is fantastic. And again, it's just diving into your imagination, indulging in what you want purely without anyone else's influence. It's yours. And I think that's where the greatest art comes from. I know it, because I've looking at art history and movie history and music history, it really is just purely coming from people. It's not until it's meddled with is that it starts to become typical or stale. And so I'm excited to see what you do next. And what I usually do at the end of these episodes, I ask everybody the same question. And so if you were, because, we're not always going to be here, when you leave this earth or you leave this life, if you can retain something, your consciousness, if you retain it as you go through, what would you take with you?
It seems simple, but the first thing that came to mind was just the way it smells after it rains on pavement. That's just that scent, that feeling, because that's kind of all encompassed. That's a memory to me that expands.
Welcome back to Off to the Witch. I'm your host, Christopher Garetano, and I want to thank you for joining us on our new Halloween special, as well as our brand new and forthcoming episodes. We have some wonderful chapters up ahead as we celebrate Halloween all year long. This holiday, like no other, continues to have a profound effect on me and my work. I'm a result of the deep wells of influence, and I tend, now that I recognize what they are, to purposefully dive into them for inspiration. To connect with these wells is to be open with all senses, and this is not just for artists, but for anyone experiencing life. An early memory of summer, the blast of a shotgun as bats fly into the air, silhouetted by the amber light of the setting sun. It's an ocean as vast as any galaxy. Halloween is as much a celebration of the dead as it is about being alive. I'm open to what all 5 senses can bring tonight, and to enjoy life every forthcoming day before I make my inevitable journey to the next mysterious place. Happy Halloween to all, and to the living, the dead, as well as the undead, a good night.